Hi, everybody. So I figured I would give my thoughts, spoiler-filled thoughts, of episode 1 when it comes to the Wheel of Time television show that was just dropped by Sony and Amazon. And I was one of the fortunate few that got to see the screening of the first two episodes down in Miami, Florida. And that's where we got the big poster. So I'm going to kind of go into detail as to what I think about the show from the perspective of someone that has been with the series for very, very many years of my life, including the entirety of my adult life. So, first things first. Episode 1 sets the stakes very high, and it does tumble a tiny bit at the end, but I actually kind of like how it tumbled. I kind of like how the show is playing out, and I really enjoy that it feels a lot like what Brandon Sanderson was saying and Rafe was saying, that it is another turning of the wheel. We're introduced to the cast of characters fairly early. There was a very interesting opening sequence that some people are disagreed and split on. In my personal opinion, I believe that the way that they portrayed Leandrin and the way that they portrayed the Aes Sedai hunting down the man who can channel, it was done fairly well, at least in terms of an action sequence, and it gets you kind of up out of your seats right away, and you get to see this beautiful landscape, and it's so pretty. But what I really enjoyed about it, as awkward as some of the dialogue seemed, it immediately tells you that there's something wrong whenever a man uses the power. I noticed that they mentioned that it's a one power in the show, at least in the first 3 episodes, but they never mention Saidar Saidin, which is something I've really noticed about the advertising material, that they are not mentioning Saidar Saidin. They're not mentioning the split between the two powers. So they're referencing it as one power, and they're referencing, like as the character Leandrin mentions, this is a power for women. It is not a power for men. When men use it, you make it filthy. Because of that line, it's like for some reason, it's showing the skew of how if a man uses the power, then it becomes tainted, as though it's a weird thing that they're kind of doing, but it kind of puts into this thought process that maybe they draw from the same source, but I don't think that's how it's supposed to be portrayed, but we'll see what they do with the show. But past the initial opening sequence, you get the scene with Lan and Moraine just saying that they're going to go to the Two Rivers, and they mentioned Fort Taviran there. Okay, so this has been a slightly bit divisive when it comes to the reader base, but I think it's a good thing when it comes to the fan base, or through the viewer base, the people that are watching the show for the first time. They don't know what Taviran means. The fan base does, and it's an immediate call to why they're going there. But the question that I would have is, why are there rumors? I mean, there's a bunch of things continuity-wise that would not make sense there. However, rumors of Fort Taviran there, it gives them an excuse to be going there. I kind of also was a little bit put off a tiny bit, just because it appeared that the two men running at the beginning of the series, they appeared to be Borderlanders with top knots and everything like that. But the problem is that getting from the Borderlands to the Two Rivers is not a hop, skip, and a jump, at least not relative. And they give us no context as to where that initial conflict happens, but time-wise, it has to be relatively close to the Two Rivers. It doesn't make sense any other way. But this isn't to be super analytical of episode 1. This is more to just see my impressions of it. Then we get the scene with the women's circle. And as some other people have mentioned, it is interesting to see this dichotomy between how Leandrin interprets how women have strength and how the women's circle interprets how women have strength. So I'm not sure if they're trying to key in that possibly one of these is a villain and one of these is correct, one of these is wrong. But the point is that the scene with the women's circle, it's an expansion on things that are not actually portrayed in the books. These are not things that are interpreted in the books at all. So, like, we don't know the inner workings of the women's circle. It's not something that they do on page. So they get a lot of artistic liberties, and they play up a whole thing later on where it shows Aguain with a mark on her arm, like she got hurt or branded or scarred in some way from something, and they still haven't shown us how that happens, even after 3 episodes. But she gets tossed in the river, which is from the trailer, and everybody's aware of it. But the thing is that it is a metaphor for surrendering, and it's also a metaphor to the books in terms of surrendering to the one power and everything else like that. But what I can say is that if you are basing everything off of, if you're basing everything off of the story directly, you have to base it on what they can show. So it's easier to show than to tell in that respect. But anyway, moving on past the women's circle section, you get this shot of Aguain exhausted on the river, almost drowning, and then we have the shot of the two rivers and Tam and Rand on the road. You get to see this pretty much like condensed sequence of Tam and Rand talking to each other about what's going on with the quarry road and reminiscing about stuff in the past. You don't encounter the Black Rider on the road, which is fine. It's artistic liberty. Let them do what they need to do to try to portray the story. But then we move past into them entering the town. We get the shots of Matt and Perrin. We get this take on Barney Harris as Matt. And oh my gosh, did he play this role right. There's some people that are upset that it appears that he's a thief, but Matt's always kind of been a pickpocket in a way. Like you can say that him gambling away people's money righteously is, righteous. It's not illegal. It's not wrong, if he's taking it from the wrong people or taking it from people that are cheating and all that. But the point is that Matt's always kind of been a scoundrel. He's always been portrayed as a scoundrel, and he gets a lot more character development in the early goings of these books. Than he would typically in the books in the early goings of these episodes. So it's brilliant how they portrayed him early on in the story. And you can also see the care that he has for his sisters as the story progresses, and he gets frustrated about his mother and his father. His father being what appears to be a lecher, his mother wanting to, call him out in public in front of this little town. And again, you have the town lecher, you have the town guy who's just, going around canoodling all these people instead of, being loyal to his wife and going against typical custom. And it's a good character moment to see if Matt is going to follow in his father's footsteps, or if there's possibly going to be a redemption arc for the future for Abel Cawthon. But seeing the girls and his relationship with trying to take care of his sisters was very well put together, and I appreciated that a lot, at least when it comes to the story. So then we also have Perrin, and Perrin having a wife, and everybody in the community being divisive about Perrin having a wife. Here's the thing. What I noticed about her, about three things. So the first thing is she has blonde hair, which is completely out of the norm for anybody in the Two Rivers, which means she's potentially an outlander. Two, she also has a multitude of earrings in her ear. This isn't something that is ever portrayed in the books outside of the Sea Folk, potentially, and the Sea Folk are supposed to be canonically black in the books, but that's fine. But the point is that her braid is different than anybody else's because it's not a typical braid. It appears to be like a Norse braid, which is significantly different from the regular culture. It's actually really clashing with the rest of the Two Rivers. And then past it being a Norse braid, it also, you have the earrings. And thirdly, she does not regularly participate with the women's circle like they typically do. This is brought up by Nynaeve that Layla was not there. But the point is that the way that she is interpreted, I see her as an outlander. I see her as someone that is not from the Two Rivers, that came to the Two Rivers as potentially a refugee, as potentially as something, and became friends with Perrin because they both liked the Forge, and that's why they had a connection. They also lean in very heavily that she was potentially pregnant. Not even subtly. It's just like, she probably have a baby in her. That's cool, and Perrin's excited for it. But she's also seems to be an outcast in the story. She seems to be someone that is not from the Two Rivers at all. But everybody talks as though she is, part of the women's circle and she's part of the family and everything else like that. So maybe there's more to Layla's story. I honestly think that Layla is going to play a bigger role overall with the story as it progresses. And you do see a slight bit of that, and this is full spoilers for the first 3 episodes, but I'm not going to go into the details of other episodes. But you do see her in other sections in future episodes. So I'm hoping that they at least elaborate on it. And it's also a typical trope, as mentioned by Daniel Green in his video, to have the man lose someone close to him in order to push his development. So we have Layla there, and we have things like that. So whatever, to me, I think that there's an interesting plot point that I'll get to with Winter Night, but moving on to Rand and Aguain. Yes, they get it on. Okay, they're adults. They've been childhood like sweethearts since they were little. There's a mention by Tam that he used to be, doe-eyed over Aguain when she was younger. So all these things put together, you have Aguain and Rand inevitably hooking up as a thing. I mean, at least it's severely implied that it happened because Rand comes out shirtless. But the point is that this is not a jarring thing for me. They showed it in the trailers, which was, at that point, it was jarring. But it also showed that they're aging them up and they're making these people be more intimate. So that's Rand and Aguain. We get the land booty scene, which Rosamund Pike pretty much told everybody there's going to be more male nudity than female, and it's true. At least in the first 3 episodes, there's a land butt. Okay, he's got a butt. Cool. Made people go nuts. Good for them. But it doesn't really bother me because it shows that they have a level of intimacy between each other that is not overtly sexual. So I'll take that, and it also shows their level of a bond, and Lan is actually relaxing, which is something that is also not normal in the early goings of the series. So moving on to Winter's Night, after we have the confirmation that Matt stole. We have confirmation that he's doing deals with Paddon Fane. Paddon Fane is very well cast because he just seems like a complete, snarky piece of garbage. He's like, yeah, and I know this, and blah, blah, blah. And he's so confident in his actions. So I'll take the Paddon Fane that we got. I think that he's exceptionally well cast, and a little bit in Winter Night. Again, we'll get to the Winter Night fight. But moving past all that, we have the Beltane ceremony. Here's the thing. This was explained in the books that they're going to have a Beltane. It got interrupted early on in Winter Night. Cool. But we actually get to see Beltane this time. We actually get to see the emotions behind it all. We get to see everybody remembering the people that they've lost over the years. This is all Beltane. And now we kind of know what Beltane means. And we get Tam's amazing speech. Phenomenal. I loved it. Every second of it. It was so... You get goosebumps, right? And it's so well put together. And you also get the scene earlier than that. I'm skipping around a little bit, but where we know as readers what Moiraine is doing with Nynaeve, trying to deduce her age, because she needs to know if this possible super channeler that she can sense is the dragon. And she confirms in her head she's not the dragon. She can't be. But that's fine. But we also get a backstory for Nynaeve that, again, I talked about it yesterday on stream. It changes a bit of the narrative, but it also explains it like it's another turning, and it gives her a motivation past the fact that Moiraine took those darn kids, to be angry with the Aes Sedai. So I'll take that, right? But then past all that, we finally get to Winter's Night. So we get to see the emotion of Matt and how much he cares about his sisters. And we also get to see sudden impact with Tom, I think was his name, or Tim, that Aguain was dancing with dying. Which, mind you, hero of the story, totally saved Egwene's butt there, just saying. But the point is that, so we have him dead, we have the thrill of Winter Night with all these monsters just coming out of nowhere, right? This little wholesome village, now you're getting sacked by monsters. But then past all of that, we have this awkward moment where Aguain is just kind of hunched and running in circles. I don't know why that happened, but it's fine. It's early goings and they're trying to show the intensity. And to be fair, in my brain, I'd be scared crapless if this happened. So it's not beyond the thought that maybe she's actually terrified and doesn't know how to respond. Her fight or flight is completely broken. But I'm trying to keep this video under 20 minutes because it'd be easier that way. But I'll just get to the basic points. We have Tam and Rand in the cabin, and Bella is giving them a signal that something's wrong. And then there's one Trollic, which it really seemed a little odd to me that they'd send one Trollic to deal with one of the boys when they sent an entire fleet to deal with just 3 of them technically. But that's all whatever. It's not really a big deal. But the point is that you get to see Tam bust out the sword, and he goes toe-to-toe with the Trollic, and it shows he's rusty, but he can hold his own, which is really cool. You get to see this this development in that sense. And Rand kills the Trollic. Again, he kills the Trollic in a different way than he did in the books, but it's fair. And he agrees that he's going to take Tam to the village, and he starts going with Tam to the village. And then we have the rest of Winter Night, where you get to see Rosamund Pike and Daniel Henney being Lan and Moiraine working in tandem amazingly to vanquish this threat. And we do get the sword, or the knife, or whatever, the giant cleaver that hits Moiraine in the side that causes a wound. I like this wound because it gives a lot of plot importance to the story. So I'll take it, because then she just dredges up all of her power to attack the Trollocs and push them away. But even that's not enough to stop the oncoming army. But the point is, we also get the Winespring Inn destroyed. And I honestly think that by the time that any of the characters return to the Two Rivers, the Winespring Inn is going to be halfway built back. And it's going to be a reference to the Two Rivers picking up and going on. We also get the death of Senbui, which, mind you, he's not a character that a lot of people appreciated in the books that much, and I personally don't either. So him dying is not that big of a deal. And they also didn't even go far enough to even introduce him in the story. He's not he doesn't even have a scene. I don't think he has any lines outside of grumbles. And so it's fine. Let him pass on, and let's move on to the next bit. But when it comes to the final bit of Winter Night that's extremely significant, and where we get into tiny bits of speculation, we have the Perrin scene. So one, this accomplishes in my brain 2 things. The first is, I think that this is going to replace Perrin killing the White Cloaks in the steading. I think that this is going to be the display of Perrin cutting loose and losing his mind in the fight and in the blood rush of battle. It's a very well portrayed thing, and a lot of soldiers have described this in the past, that whenever you get into whenever you're killing, whenever you're trying to fight for your life, you go blank, right? And so that's fantastic. Him and Layla are working mainly in tandem, but there is a very distinct thing. Perrin gets his eyes slapped with embers, so he's blinded. I like this scene. I think that it means that Perrin is going mainly off instinct, which then there is the next bit, which is Perrin hacking a Trollic to bits, and he goes to fling backwards because he senses someone behind him, and he kills Layla. Now, 2 things. First is, it's the first showing of Perrin's frenzied state, and it's also the first showing of Perrin's inherent senses. The second thing is that in my head, at least from what I gathered, and apparently this was brought up a lot on the Dusty Wheel last night, it appeared that Layla was going to swing the hammer down. But my question is on what? There was no Trollic in between the 2 of them. There was no the Trollic that Perrin was killing was dead. He hacked that thing to bits. So, was she going to kill Perrin? I think that possibly Layla may be an interpretation of an old theory that a lot of people were having, that is that Carrie Althor was potentially a Dark Friend, and that's why Balsamon had access to her body at the end of Book 1. Now, that's also a very rampant speculative fan theory. It is not confirmed in any way, and no one has ever discussed it in that capacity, to my understanding. However, I think that this may be a stand-in. I think that potentially Layla may have been a person brought from the Outlands that had, maybe she's like Ingtar with the oaths that she wants to get away from, but you can't get away from them forever, that type of thing. Maybe that's why she didn't go to the Women's Circle meeting. Maybe she knew this attack was coming, and that's why she was trying to avoid Perrin. There's a lot of things. And I hope that Layla is going to be expanded on in the story, because it gives us fresh material. It gives us something past what we've already encountered in the stories. A book series that we have read nonstop since, at least I've read nonstop since I was a teenager. So, those are my overall thoughts, because right after that, Moiraine heals Lan after Rand arrives, and she pretty much says, okay, we gotta go, and they leave. That's probably where the pacing issue comes in, because you have this anchor, right? You have like 3 anchors coming down. You have Rand worried about his father. You have Perrin, tied to Layla and afraid because she died and he's in shock. And then you have Matt attached to his sisters. And you have Aguain attached to Nynaeve. By the way, there's also a scene where in the middle of Winter Night, apparently Nynaeve just gets pulled out of the fight and she's gone. That was unexpected, at least in the theaters. Nobody expected that, especially, like, we all audibly gasped at that point because it's like, they're not going to kill off Zoe Robbins because we haven't seen that scene yet, but still, she's gone? Okay, so there's no Nynaeve at all. That's really interesting. But past all that, the issue with pacing that people see, and people have been pointing out, and I can agree with it, again, you're talking about a TV pilot, you're talking about something that has to grab people's attention right away, is everybody's like super tied down. There's no bye-bye scene, right? Like there's no Rand talking with Tam. There's no Matt telling the girls, don't worry, everybody will take care of you. There's no scene with Perrin even burying Layla. Like, all of this doesn't happen, which is why it feels like it's rushed a little bit. I think that if there is an extended cut of episode 1, then those 3 parts will be added to the series. You'll have, or possibly 4, because you'll probably have Aguain talking with her parents about what's going on and everything else. Because I realize that they're trying to rush it, but it's like Rand has a new coat suddenly. Perrin doesn't have any blood on him. There's like so much that just appears like maybe within like an hour happened of the discussion of Moraine saying, we gotta go, one of you guys is the dragon. I think that is where the pacing kind of broke a little bit. But aside from that, I think the show was really well put together, and I've had a good time with it. So I watched all 3 episodes last night. I will try to get up the other 2 reviews by the end of the day, if not by tomorrow, but I honestly think that this is a good start to the series. I think that when it comes to the overall rating, I gave episode 1 like an 8 out of 10. The only thing that bothered me was that slight hiccup at the end. But when it comes to the new material, I actually really enjoy it. And I mean, there's even parts that I missed, little bits like Rand. I mean, probably one of the most choked up emotional moments that my wife had and I had while we were watching it was Rand sitting on a cliff talking to Aguain and telling her, I dream of my family that I'll raise, the kids that I'll have, the house I'll build, the wife I'll have. Like, he's sitting there, like, pleading with her, saying, this is what I've always wanted. And the thing is from the perspective of readers, we know the hazards and problems that Rand is going to run into throughout the rest of the series. So hearing that, it just gives you this, like, oh my gosh, he always just wanted to go home. And it's a great moment when it comes to the story. But overall, I will reserve at the very end of these videos to talk about my absolute favorite moment in the entire episode, which is, in my opinion, Tam's speech. Tam's speech, to me, was the absolute best part of this episode. 100%. It was so good. It's delivered well. It is so... like, it encapsulates the lore, it encapsulates memory and loss and just hope for the future. It's so well done. And I love that scene, and you can tell that, I believe his name is Michael Mickelhadden, is putting on a fantastic performance at that moment. So, anyway, video went over 20 minutes. I apologize. But either way, I will have this up by the end of the day, and I appreciate anybody that wants to take their opinion. Please leave your comments in the section down below if you are interested. Thank you very much, and I'm getting back to streaming. See you later.